they were seeking more experience, I think, overall for the wide receiver core this offseason. And you lost a guy who's played for nearly a decade in the NFL and has had productive moments. I just think that this was kind of, I don't even want to say insurance for the draft. They drafted Johnny Wilson, they drafted Anaya Smith, two totally different receivers. But this was done to kind of give them veteran depth, but nothing guaranteed. I did not expect him to make the 53-man roster, but we'll never find out if he would have or he would not have.
I actually think that this is a bigger deal than maybe we're making, like, or you were making it out to be. Like, even if, and listen, I did the same exercise and I had him off, but it was like very much on, like on the bubble. But the truth is that 2 days ago, DeVante Parker was the third best wide receiver on the Eagles roster. Okay. And
You think over Paris Campbell?
Yes, he is a better wide receiver today than Paris Campbell is. I mean,
okay,
he has done more almost every single year of his career than Paris Campbell has done in every single year of his career except for one. And Paris Campbell is a complete dice roll of even staying healthy, let alone being productive. The Eagles threw numbers at the wide receiver 3 spot. That's part of why DeVante Parker made sense, because there was no downside to it. Even he's retired, and here we are again. But they did not sign a player of significance there. They did not draft a player before round 5 there. Anaya Smith might be awesome. Johnny Wilson might be, DeVante Parker 2.0. Paris Campbell might stay healthy. Maybe Britton Covey can turn into a quality slot receiver. But for all of the focus on like the roster machinations that they've had and the fact that they have now extended DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown, that third wide receiver is going to be on the field a lot, right? The Eagles are going to be in 11 personnel 75% of the time, probably. And right now, they don't have anybody who they can count on. They have a lot of guys who they are hoping for, but they also don't have great, insurance for if DeVonta Smith or A.J. Brown get injured, which, knock on wood, they have not over the past 2 years, despite A.J. Brown having a history of injuries and, DeVonta Smith being pegged as a potential injury risk entering the league because he's so slight. The Eagles have been fortunate there. That may not stay the case. If we are going to look back on this offseason, and if there is anything that Howie Roseman has not done that we're going to look back on, to me, and we have been saying it all along, it is the absence of a significant wide receiver 3 here. So it's not like DeVante Parker's down, the season's ending, but more so they cannot be done here is my expectation.
No, that's a really good point. And for full disclosure, there's a piece up now on allphly.com. I put it up last night among its possibilities in free agency and via trade. And what I'll say is that this market has dried up some, even after the draft, right? If they wanted to make a move after the draft, Tyler Boyd and I think Marquise Valdes-Scantling, there were a few guys there, and that market's dried up a bit. There's still guys available, and we can get to that. But you are right in terms of number 3 wide receivers, and you have to kind of look at it from a body type perspective too. Anaya Smith is in a different conversation than DeVante Parker. Now with A.J. Brown and with DeVonta Smith, these are 2 players that the Eagles can move inside. So the third receiver could play on the outside, and Smith and or Brown could be on the inside. So it's not as if they need like a prototypical slot guy as the third wide receiver. But I do know that the Eagles felt they needed to have a reliable or a dependable backup for A.J. Brown, like a big-bodied prototypical X receiver. And some of their futures deals were big-bodied guys, but that's what DeVante Parker gave you. And there's going to be a lot of attention on Johnny Wilson this spring and this summer. And that's a lot to expect of a 6th-round pick who was not like a prolific producer in college. You see traits that you think you can develop, as the Eagles said on draft weekend. He's unique, but certainly I don't think you go into a season unless there's an outstanding spring and summer saying, all right, Johnny Wilson's the top backup for A.J. Brown on the outside. And so that I think there are a number of options they can put at wide receiver 3, and wide receiver 3 in this offense is really the 5th option in the passing game. Because obviously you have your top two receivers, Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley. But we saw in Week 18 and in the playoffs what happens when DeVante and or AJ are down. And then the other part too is the Eagles just don't have someone who you say this is your number 3. And to the point about DeVante Parker being more proven than Paris Campbell, a reasonable argument could be made that the Eagles have actually downgraded here when you consider Quez Watkins had meaningful. Now he struggled last year. I get that, but Quez Watkins might have given you more in the past 2-3 years than what Paris Campbell or what DeVante Parker, might have did. So
I think you are now being unfair to DeVante Parker.
Okay, but this is a roundabout way of saying.
I mean, DeVante Parker had 33 catches for 394 last year, not great, and then 31 for 539 the year before that. Quez Watkins in the last 2 years has I'll look it up.
That's fair. You're right.
142 last year and 354 the year before. So even the year before was not terrible. But and listen, that is a problem with the Eagles offense and has been a problem with the Eagles offense. They have not utilized all of their available receivers. Jalen Hurts doesn't throw to the other guys on the field, even if they're open. We've all seen the clips of Jack Stoll or Grant Calcaterra just standing there wide open, Albert O, and he doesn't throw them the ball. Quez Watkins, he's in theory is stretching the shape, the geometry of the defense because they have to respect his speed. But Jalen Hurts, especially last year, was not throwing those passes. And to be fair, I think that was part of the reason of the allure of DeVante Parker, because the thing that DeVante Parker does is catch contested balls on the outside. And those are the balls that Jalen Hurts is willing to throw. And so the theory of Paris Campbell or Britton Covey or Aeneas Smith is all reliant on Jalen Hurts throwing passes that he doesn't usually like to throw or hasn't over the past couple of years, right? It is expecting a slightly different Jalen Hurts. The offense is going to be a little bit different. Maybe Jalen Hurts is going to buy into that. But right now, they don't have somebody who fills that role of the kind of player that Jalen Hurts might be willing to throw the ball to.
That's a valid point. So knowing the 10 receivers they have here, do you think that the Eagles look at the internal options? Do you think that they take this spring to see that? Or do you think Howie Roseman's meeting with his pro personnel staff right now saying who's our top option to bring in for one of these open roster spots?
Well, I'm sure that they're having those conversations, and I'm sure that they, before DeVante Parker retired, had their list of guys on the street and then also potential trade targets. My guess is let's go through the spring. Let's see how the rookies look. Let's see how Paris Campbell looks. Let's revisit this in the summer. I think they will be willing to part with a late round pick for a guy who has fallen out of favor somewhere. You mentioned Treylon Burks in your write-up. I think Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, the other guy on the Titans, is actually a potential fit as well because he's a dirty work player and can do a little bit on the outside. Let's see how the roster cuts shake out. But I think that this is an area where the Eagles are probably not done. If you had to guess right now, Zach, who's going to take the third most snaps on the team at wide receiver in 2024, who would you say?
I would say Paris Campbell. But again, I think you put it well when you said the theory of Paris Campbell, because it really is theoretical right now.
Yeah, Paris Campbell is like Rashad Penny from last year. It's let's put if we get 5 good games out of him, that's probably more than we could reasonably expect.
I like, or I know they like Aeneas Smith, but Professor Selman put this well on Twitter. He's a 5'9" wide receiver who never had more than 800 yards at Texas A&M
and didn't break 4.5.
Sure. So yeah, I said going into the draft, I thought they were going to take a wide receiver in the first 3 rounds. They did not do that, clearly, right? I was wrong about that. But they're in a position here where I do think this is something that they must address. And even when you talk about some of these guys that they signed on futures deals, whether it's returning players like Joseph Ngata, whether it's players like Jacob Harris, they really it's not as if you say, all right, this guy's going to be your number 3 wide receiver. It's players who are competing for back of the roster spots. Now, Britton Covey is someone who I think the Eagles will take a look at in the slot this offseason. When we had Britton Covey on the show, at the Super Bowl, he mentioned in his first conversation with Kellen Moore that, playing offense is something he's kind of training for this offseason. The big name that's out there, I don't know if you want to get to that now or if you want to hit on the break, but the big name that's out there is Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas, similar to Paris Campbell, you're talking about extensive injury history. Okay, he's played, I think, 20 games in the past 4 years, but he is a former offensive player of the year who now you could say this is Julio Jones flashbacks from a year ago. He played last year and he had his most productive year in 3 years last year. So you could potentially do worse as the number 3 wide receiver, but I don't think Michael Thomas, you have a parade around Broad Street for bringing Michael Thomas at age 31.
Well, it's not even that. I mean, even if Michael Thomas was magically healthy, they're not going to get through one practice without him and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson beating each other to death.
Slant boy. Like, they want competitive zeal, right?
2 guys walk on the field. Only one of them's walking out.
Sure.
Slant boy. You can't be bringing in Slant boy.
So he's the best wide receiver still out there via free agency.
Well, he's the most accomplished.
The biggest name. He's the biggest name. Fair. There's I put McCole Hardman on there. McCole Hardman had a forgettable season with the Jets last year.
Actually, it was a memorable season.
Yeah, that's true. Then he
was cheating.
Then he goes to the Chiefs, catches the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. McCall, he's someone who has production in the NFL, still young, doesn't give you the size on the outside. While we go through these names, I should ask you, do you think the size on the outside matters? Do you think you should just look for the best option you can find, or do you think they need that big-bodied, prototypical X receiver?
I actually do think that the size specifications is probably overstated, especially at this point. Like, whoever the best guy out there is, find a way to play him.
Sure.
If he's a slot guy, great. If he is better on the outside, then DeVonta Smith and AJ Brown can go inside, right? Like, I think beggars can't be choosers here on that front.
There's Corey Davis, who retired last year, filed his papers to return back in March. Davis was a hotly pursued free agent back in 2021, played 2 seasons with the Jets, has experience as that prototypical outside receiver, 6'3", 209. He's someone who, when you look at draft pedigree, which the Eagles have clearly paid attention to this offseason, he certainly has that, former number 5 pick in the draft. But again, he retired last year. Speaking of that draft class, the Eagles had John Ross work out for them at the rookie minicamp. They, of course, did not sign him. John Ross hasn't played in the NFL since 2021. So, again, I don't know if that's your number 3 wide receiver.
I think Corey Davis fits if you were looking for the size thing, and less about the size than the willing to do the dirty work aspect, right? If you need somebody on the field who is willing to do a little bit of blocking, Corey Davis is very good at that, as just sort of being a bit player in the offense, not necessarily like angry if he doesn't get targeted. That would be one that in theory would make sense.
Then I did not put it on the list, but Hunter Renfrow in terms of the prototypical slot. Now that's
a shot across Britton Covey's bow. Like if Britton Covey sees Hunter Renfrow come in, he's like, it's the Spider-Man meme. It's what are we doing here?
Yes, yeah. I did not want to profile, but one would think that you have now Hunter Renfrow has far more production in the NFL than Britton Covey, but you would at least want to give Britton Covey a look in terms of style of play. And then I put this in partly as a joke for you, but you can't roll it out knowing the Eagles. Julio Jones is still out there, okay, on the free agent market. I think trading.
Zach, after everything you have accomplished over the course of this offseason with the DeVante Parker retirement, you deserve for Julio to come.
I put trade candidates on here, and that's the route I would go. Traylon Burks.
I have one other free agent for you before you get to the trade.
Let's hear. Yep.
As long as we're playing to type and being self-caricatures of ourselves, you know who's out there?
Who's that? Big Bob?
Someone who we interviewed at the Super Bowl.
DeAndre Carter.
You're goddamn right DeAndre Carter is out there.
Carter
had 46 catches for 538 yards just 2 seasons ago.
Was he? And he was with the Chargers last year, correct?
He was, but he was just a special teams player for the most part.
They brought in
No,
Will
he was with
Greer.
the Raiders. He was with the Raiders last year.
Oh,
He
this
was
is the
with
Raiders
Chargers
last
2
year.
years
Okay,
ago.
gotcha. Okay, so never overlapped.
He is 31.
With Kellen Moore. Yeah. Trade candidates. Tennessee.
Now listen, we can talk about trade candidates, but like it is true that everybody wants good wide receivers. You know,
Yes.
It's going to take a unique situation for there to be somebody who's available.
But to the point that was made a few minutes ago, there were some guys out there 2 weeks ago, like post draft. Tyler Boyd was out there.
Yes.
Right. And so the timing of this is not ideal. Now, that's not to say that perhaps the Eagles had inkling of this and they weren't interested in somebody else. But I do wonder if Parker had retired before the draft, if they would have signed someone after the draft, like a Tyler Boyd or Marquise Valdez-Scantling or someone like that. Now, speaking of Tyler Boyd, he goes to Tennessee. The Titans have this logjam now at wide receiver. They added Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd this offseason. Treylon Burks, who the Titans got in the A.J. Brown trade, right? They got the pick that they used to acquire him, but it was a different GM. It was a different head coach. Burks' production dropped last year. He's 24 years old. This is not to say that the Titans are looking to move him, but he's not at the top of the depth chart anymore. He would be intriguing to me as someone who a change of scenery type, yards after the catch, a different type of receiver. You can move him around the formation. That he's appealing to me. What do you think of Treylon Burks?
Yeah, I mean, you could make worse bets as a hoping for a change of scenery guy. I mean, that is a real I mean, how much more could you just dominate the Tennessee Titans franchise than by getting the guy who they drafted with the A.J. Brown pick? It's like a barrel of duck vaginas thing, but
a what?
It's the Louis C.K., but I don't want to, very problematic, but it's the classic,
okay.
How could you dominate a species more than that?
Yeah,
that would be very tough. But
although it's like this current Titans administration, that's not their problem. He's not their guy.
Well, yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, they get to throw the previous
exactly
group under the bus. Yeah. Absolutely. And I said before, Westbrook Akini makes a little bit of sense to me.
Good point too. Iowa always has those tough wide receivers. John Mechie from Houston. Houston has added. They added Diggs. They brought back Noah Brown. They have Nico Collins. They have Tank Dell. They have Robert Woods. Robert Woods, in theory, someone who could be available as well. But
what about Robert Woods?
Yeah, maybe so. Right, as far as a veteran. But John Mechie, who is a second-round pick in 2022, unfortunately missed his rookie season while recovering from a form of leukemia. It's wonderful to hear that he's healthy now. Returned last year. He played mostly, or not mostly in the slot, but a lot in the slot as a rookie, 44.5% of his offensive snaps in the slot, but he played outside at Alabama with DeVonta Smith for a period of time there. 5'11", 187, but still young, draft pedigree. And again, the Titans are in a situation this year where they've improved their wide receivers. It could be a numbers game there.
A bit of a numbers game. One other team that I think a potential and this is just like picking up a guy who has not worked out for them, the Panthers. So they've got Thielen, Xavier Legette, who they drafted, Deontay Johnson, who they traded for. That means that Jonathan Mingo and Terrace Marshall, both recent early round picks who have not done well, could potentially be free for a cheap price.
I would say of those two, Marshall's probably more available, right? Mingo's going into year 2 for them.
Yeah.
So still pretty early on. Marshall's going into the last year of his deal. He's going into year 4. That would be interesting to me. I mean, he certainly brings size. He was a big slot when he was at LSU, but you can probably move him around. I like that idea. That's a good one. Now we talked about trading a late round pick. I would be interested if I were Howie, and again, it takes 2 to tango, in a player for player deal, trade from their cornerback surplus, right? Because we talked about that they have numbers at corner. I don't know what Zach McPherson's value is coming off of a season-ending injury.
Zach McPherson. I mean, I like Zach McPherson. Yeah. No one's trading anything for Zach.
But maybe
I stand by Eli Ricks.
Eli Ricks
to me is the guy who's going to be traded.
Yeah. So if you told me Eli Ricks for a second-year wide receiver or a third-year wide receiver, I would not be opposed to that. And I would actually think the Eagles did good work taking an undrafted guy and you trade for someone who the reality is, and I like Eli Ricks a lot. I liked him when he was at training camp last year. Thought he did everything the Eagles asked him to do during the season. A wide receiver that they get via trade has a better chance of contributing meaningful snaps to the Eagles this year than Eli Ricks, who's now probably the fourth or fifth cornerback going into the season.
Yes, I think even probably lower than that.
Yeah.
We all silly like the mayor.